Um, and there you go. This is a recorded event. We record our hot topics and put it up on our website, CSRR-NJDEP, for anybody who wants to refer back or decided not to come this morning. They can always go back. We are planning on having over 100 people. There's about 60 in the room right now, and we'll get started and go forward. First and foremost, I forgot to say already, happy Passover, happy Easter, happy Ramadan. It is a busy week for everybody, and some of us have had a little sleep last night, and I know that our speaker today and our host, is wide awake and ready for all of our questions and queries. And we're going to get started. I'm going through my notes right here. What I'd like to do is everybody will stay muted. I'd ask you if you do have a question for the speaker, we're going to put it into the chat. Make sure you can use the chat. I'd ask, pop your name in there just to make sure it's working. You can always raise your hand and we can elevate you to be able to speak. This is a meeting format, so you do have the ability to unmute yourself. So we would ask that you stay muted while we're talking and going Q&A back and forth, unless there's something that has to be said at that point in time. And raise your hand. We'll make believe we're in a classroom, and we're going to be cordial and work this together. With that said, Dave, your video just went off. Hopefully that's only temporary. There you are, you're back. Okay. I think I've covered my ground rules because I want to jump in because I want to be cognizant of everybody's time and get you out within an hour. I am very glad and happy to have join us this morning the Assistant Commissioner of Contaminated Site Remediation and Redevelopment Program, Mr. David Haymes. So I'll give you a couple of notes of background on him. He became the Assistant Commissioner. It says here July of 2022. That was the interim or the preliminary. They had to make sure they completed his complete background check and knew everything that he did in college. And with that said, he is a graduate. He has a bachelor's from Colgate University and a master's from the University of Illinois, both in geology. I think that's always an important topic, because when you talk to somebody who has been in the trenches, as David has, from starting out as a geologist in 1989 to working through a tech coordinator to section chief, executive assistant to the assistant commissioner of site remediation, and then most recently the director of enforcement, technical and financial support, and administrator of the New Jersey Spill Fund. I don't think there's really anything that he hasn't touched and worked on through his, if I do the math, what is that, 34 years at the department. Do you get a watch at 25, or what do you get at 30?
I got a clock at 5 years and it broke.
It broke.
Yeah.
So, so with that, I want to jump right in, and I do also appreciate, he's very busy in his days, a lot going on, and also, thank his assistant Sana for making sure that we had this connection, and that she gave me the topics I can talk about. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about everything because we have a lot going on in the program I still call site remediation. So David, just so you know, I am going to spotlight you, so don't get scared, but when you, that way people see you when you speak.
Okay.
Going forward. So, okay, with that said, first thing I want to, give you the opportunity, talk about the program, where you see the program right now. And one of the things that I thought was important, who are your key people in what positions? And I'm going to say site remediation, I apologize, in, contaminated site remediation and redevelopment. So let's start there.
First thing, site remediation is fine. I say it more often than not. And it's easier than it's more acceptable for the acronym of being CSRR. Sana prefers Caesar. I've gone with CSRR. So again, I'm the assistant commissioner for the program, and I'd like to thank Phil and CPES for having me here this morning. So Gwen Zervis is the director. Right now there are two divisions. There's the Division of Remediation Management, and Gwen Zervis is the director there. In that division, there are, in our structure, 3 elements. There's the remediation response element, or remediation review element. That's under Lynn Mitchell. And that encompasses our Bureau of Inspection and Review. Under Atwood Davis is the bureau chief, and the Bureau of Remedial Action Permitting under Mike Gaudio. Another element over there is the response oversight element. That is our Bureau of Case Management, Bureau of Field Operations, And those are where, again, the traditional oversight type cases, federal lead cases, things like that. The other, and then our Bureau of Field Operations, they're kind of our boots on the ground. They get involved in a lot of our underground heating oil tank cases. The UHOD group that issues the NFAs comes out of our BFO group. The NFAs come out of the BFO group. The third element over there is our publicly funded element, and that encompasses our Bureau of Site Management, which is hands-on, where we're running operations, we're doing the RI, we're doing the RA, we're doing the long-term O&M. And the other group there is our environmental measures and site assessment. Hold on a sec. And that's our field sampling group, our IEC group. If you haven't, whether it's a publicly funded IEC or an RP lead IEC, it still has a case manager assigned. And that group, those case managers come out of the Bureau of Environmental Measurement, the site assessment. They do our unknown source investigations. If we're doing any of our own sampling for whatever reason, again, that all comes out of them. So on the other side, Phil?
No, keep going, David.
Okay. On the other side is the division I used to run, the Division of Enforcement, Technical, and Financial Support. Right now, Frank DeFeo is the acting director over there, and we're seeing what we can do to get a full-time position or person fully assigned in that position. So as the name implies, that's our enforcement group. The enforcement element has enforcement in it. Our IT group under Joe Weaker, enforcement is under Ann Wolf. And then we have our Bureau of Case Assignment and Initial Notice. Kirsten Hahn runs the Bureau. They're our clearinghouse. A lot of the documents, again, come in through the portal. On the traditional side, a lot of documents are still coming in on paper. Publicly funded stuff gets funneled through BCANE. For right now, our permits still get funneled through BCANE when they come in the door. We're doing everything we can to get an online service going for the permitting. That is one of our top priorities on the IT side of things. We have our technical support group. Mary Ann Kruzer is the assistant director there. And that's our bureaus of environmental evaluation and risk assessment. They're the soil people, the risk assessors, eco. Alan Motter has taken over for Kevin Scheck. He's not in an acting role, but most of the information is funneling through Alan when it comes in the door. And then we have our Bureau of Groundwater Pollution Abatement. There's where the geologists are, as the name implies. They handle all the groundwater issues. They work with our water program, the department's water program, assisting in developing groundwater standards. I forgot, soil and indoor air information comes out of Environmental Evaluation and Risk Assessment Bureau as well. And then, who am I missing? Financial support. Okay. And then we have the financial support element.
The program you used to run. You know, that
yeah, the program I used to run. Frank is still the assistant director in that group, and they handle all the financial aspects. We have our fund management section. If somebody's applying or sending in a spill fund claim or applying for UST money, that would go in through the fund management section. And then we have billing and cost recovery. Again, you know, we send out our quarterly bills for traditional cases. We send out the annual bills for LSRP cases or permit cases. And then they also handle our cost recovery side if we put liens on properties through the Spill Act. Again, as the spill fund administrator, we put the liens down, we'll go into negotiations and try and do cost recovery, things like that. So that is a very quick overview of the program. And I was going to say, you know, we have been tasked by the commissioner at evaluating the program, seeing how, if the two division arrangement still works, whether we want to change that at all, if we want to move some people around. One of the changes we actually have implemented that we're hoping will have an effect for the permitting side of things is they had one of their permit writers was actually splitting time, also working on financial assurance. We've taken that person, not that position. We've taken that person, moved them over into the other division where all the rest of the money is done. FA is similar enough to RFS. You know, most of the mechanisms are the same, just the timing is different. So we've assigned a new person into the RFS group to strictly handle FA. And I know one of the problems we've had is sometimes we discover glitches in the FA well after a permit application has come in. And, again, it's a stop point. We won't move forward on a permit until we know the FA is going to be solid. So we've taken that step to move that person over. We're trying to get a look at the FA sooner. I'm not saying it will completely speed up the permit process, but again, it's on the administrative side rather than the technical side. We're trying to take out one of those administrative glitches. We're having people look at the FA sooner and getting back to the person who submitted the FA if there were any problems with it. So that's one of the issues that we've already addressed. That's been about 2-3 months since that person went in there. Hopefully we'll see some positive impact from that.
Okay. I mean, you opened up a lot of different questions. So let me hit one right real quick. So, I mean, it's pretty well known, and I'm sure you deal with it every day. Over the past 3 years, you've lost a lot of institutional knowledge. Okay. I mean, you are sitting in the assistant commissioner's chair, and many of the people you started with 34 years ago are sitting on beaches somewhere or having jobs in the private sector, whichever way they may have decided to take their life. How are you, with all that institutional knowledge, what are you doing internally on training? Where do you stand personnel wise? And I know I had heard on one of the calls that there are people transferring in and out of your group. How does that stand right now? And where do you think, because I mean, we can go back and look at numbers in 2009 as to where site remediation was headcount wise, and you're dramatically lower than that. But the case numbers haven't really changed much. Where are you?
So I'm gonna rough the numbers. I'm gonna say when in 2009 to 2012, after Sarah and the full enactment in 2012, I'm gonna say we had about 380, 385 full-time staff, all the way through management, hourlies, temps, clericals, and then the hands-on staff. Right now, we're down at around, I want to say between 330 and 340. It's a little difficult sometimes to get an accurate count when they include vacancies, things like that. So, we are definitely down on some staff. We're trying to get it back up to around, I think our full complement is 340 to 350. Some of it's a war of attrition. There was the hiring freeze through the 90s into the aughts, so it was difficult getting people in the door. So there were a lot of old timers like me, a lot of new timers, and we have some great young staff here. Just phenomenal young staff, and a lot of it is just getting them up to speed. The more problematic part is that middle-aged group, I guess. If I'm old, I guess I can call them middle-aged now. But we're getting staff trained up as we go. Part of the problem is promotional opportunities. There are time constraints for when people can be promoted. There are structural constraints for having somewhat of a pyramid shape that is acceptable to personnel. And if I have a flat structure and the group next to me has an ability to move somebody up into their pyramid structure, we run into that problem as well. So we're working our way through it. We're doing what we can. I think we're doing a pretty good job of it. The problem is attrition. It's just inevitable. Like I said, I came in '89. Towards the middle/end of there was a huge hiring glut in the late 80s into the 92, 93 maybe. But all of us have 25 to 30 years in, 30 years plus. We're all 55 plus. And you do a job for a long time and retirement starts to look attractive. Unfortunately, all the people who've retired in the last 3 or 4 years, they all come back here with big smiles on their faces. They're not like miserable in retirement, which doesn't help. And so it's what we're working with. But like I said, we've got some great young folks coming in. The bunch of folks been here 3, 4, 5 years that are getting the swing of things, starting to move up, taking on larger roles. And we have 2 levels for supervision that usually in the titles, and we're starting to move some of them into that first level of supervision, and they're all doing a great job. The brain drain is what it is, and we think we're going to be able to patch the holes as we go, and we'll see where it takes us in the next few years.
Yeah, and so one follow-up to that would be, I'm trying to think who's echoing. That's you echoing maybe. Anyway, one follow-up would be: is there? I see it. Okay, someone posted. Okay, is there a current organizational chart for you? Someone posted something.
Bob Lippincott, I see, just posted the link to the org chart. We've been working on getting that updated. It's not exactly up to date anymore. I'm sorry?
Work in progress.
Yes. Yeah.
And the other thing is, now I just throw this out to you, and I know there's many people on this call who would participate. If you ever wanted to use some of the LSRPs in the world to assist in training of new employees, we would all be more than willing to do that. Because a lot of them that come in may not have been consultants or may not know what LSRPs do on a daily basis, or not that all of us know what we do on a daily basis either. But I always throw that out there, that if opportunity arises, many of us would love to come in and be able to answer the questions so that they understand how we run on a daily basis. I throw that out there.
Thank you.
As we move on, so you touched a lot of stuff. Okay, you cannot in a given day, in a given week, in a given year do everything. Okay, and for any of you who joined us this morning to talk about A901, we're not talking about A901 this morning. That has moved from underneath you into a new program. You'll have some involvement because LSRPs and site remediation projects move waste and move recycled materials, but you're not writing rules right now. Give me top 3 where you see your priorities right now and what you really want to accomplish. You've kind of touched upon a couple of them, but really, David Haymes, Assistant Commissioner, when you look at, goals you want to achieve, what are they? Top 3.
First, I'm going to talk about A901, only because I gave a talk on Tuesday evening and it came up there. Right now we still have the guidance document out there, the policy paper out there about LSRPs and subsurface evaluators and whether they need that A901 license. I just want that is still a topic out there. It is in a different group now. They've moved over to AMES or AEMS. I do not remember what that acronym stands for. They are still looking at how they can incorporate that policy into the A901 regulation that they're working on. That didn't disappear just because they left this as a program. That solid waste left here as a program. So I know some people have been concerned what's going on with that. And I just wanted to let you know, we are still looking at trying to incorporate that policy into the rules that they're writing for the dirty dirt law. So having said that, priorities from the the really high view, it's always been our policy. We want to protect receptors to the greatest extent possible. Whether we're doing the protecting, the LSRPs are doing the protecting, that's always been job number 1 for us. Make sure people can drink their water, breathe their air, whether it's at home, at their place of work, wherever. We're trying to re-emphasize getting properties turned around again, getting them redeveloped. I'm going up to Perth Amboy next week for a ribbon cutting. Trying to get rid of the blight in areas. So those are some of the priorities. Obviously, trying to something that's probably closer to home for the people in the audience here is improving on that permit turnaround time. What can we do to bring down the amount of time it's taking to get these permits signed and issued, and then the response action outcome can be issued by the LSRP, and the case can move on from there. So we're looking at our internal processes. We're looking at how we can improve the communications with the LSRPs. We had a kickoff meeting back in February. This is kind of tangential on independent professional judgment. And again, I'm emphasizing to staff, much like Mark did for the years he was here, we're not here to say, Phil, you need to put in a well. We should be here to say, Phil, what is the well structure you have out there? How is it sufficient to document that your remedy is protective? Show us that things are protective, and we should be more than willing to move on. And so a lot of that again is, what information are we looking for? What information is missing? How do we get that communication correct so documents are good when they come in, and we don't have to dive into them. The next person on the outside picking it up can be satisfied. They know everything's copacetic, things like that. So it's definitely a priority of getting back in tune with that communication issue, getting permits moving, getting cases to closure more expeditiously. And as I was
Keep going.
as I was saying, again, just putting some more emphasis again on the development side of things, making sure that developers understand, that there are properties out there that are being remediated. I don't know that we're necessarily going to start, putting up billboards and things like that. But again, how we can get the word out that properties are being remediated, that they're ready for any kind of development or redevelopment. And again, just trying to get these properties moving and improving quality of life for everybody. Tying that in, as it's a major emphasis of this administration, from the governor through the commissioner and down through the programs, is environmental justice. How can we alleviate that burden in EJ communities, overburdened communities? How can we lift some of these communities up? Cleaning up these blighted properties, improving what they look like, making neighborhoods more attractive, improving the environment in these neighborhoods, getting into areas where there may be vapor issues, water issues. What can we be doing to get these sites cleaned up and improving quality of life for the folks who live in these neighborhoods?
You just touched upon everything I wrote down here in my notes. So let's start off. So, independent professional judgment, hot topic. It is something that is near and dear to LSRP's hearts. It's something that, you had a great meeting back in February that was kind of the kickoff, and LSRP's kind of laid out, as well as PRCRs, where they thought there may have been some differences of opinions, or things weren't being handled the way people thought they should be handled based upon what the Site Remediation Reform Act really meant. We're about 2 months later almost from that meeting. There was a drop the mic moment a couple weeks ago at a brownfields update that I think has been clarified relative to a difference of opinion on independent professional judgment. From your desk, from what you see, and really, LSRPs are doing this work every day. We're putting in reports that sometimes take multiple years for review, and then we get questioned on how we did something. And again, we are recording this, so it is going to be out there. How do you see this gets fixed? What do you see as the biggest problem, and how do you think it's a means to a solution?
Thank you for reminding me that we're being recorded.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination. There are a lot of moving parts to it. I think, and I'm going to insert myself in terms of how I work if I were an LSRP. I know sometimes when I'm writing a document here, everything makes perfect sense, and it's because I wrote it and I'm too close to it. I'm not saying this is across the board or at all necessarily true, but I think part of the problem could potentially be, again, on the LSRP side, you think all the information is in there, but to a quote unquote a layperson who hasn't seen the case, who's just picking it up to see this one document, we're not as familiar with it. There may be something missing. And again, it's just trying to figure out how do we make that communication. So we're not saying, I don't think you're done. You need to do the following, and instead say, we should always be approaching this as, is the work that's out there, is the remediation protective of public health and safety and the environment? If I'm not convinced of that, I have to ask myself, well, what about it is missing? And that's the part that I need to ask about. Just I don't think you're okay over in this direction for groundwater. Why do you think you are? Have the benefit of the doubt, wait for that explanation. It shouldn't, unless it's just, I had a tank leak and I didn't put in any wells, cut and dry. Yeah. Situations where it's gray, we should only be asking questions, trying to fill in data gaps, see what's missing on it. And like I said, for me, I know sometimes I think things are crystal clear in my head, and the next person reads the document and it's like, wait, you need to explain this piece a little bit better. I don't get it.
Right. And you just brought up two good points. The people who are reviewing, let's say, remedial action reports, remedial action permit applications, may never have seen the remedial investigation report. And we're constantly saying, make sure that, how you did your remedial investigation, how you're firming it up at remedial action is clearly stated in your report. Okay. that's also adding to the cost of remediation. And now that your title is the commissioner of something that's also called redevelopment, I mean, that's adding to the cost of redevelopment. And it's a serious balancing act that us as LSRPs, PRCRs have to do before we submit documents into you. And there's some pushback at times. Is there a way to overcome that with your permit writers and remedial action report reviewers, so that there's some kind of, like, especially, and I'll throw out there, especially when a report may sit there for a couple of years? Is there a way to bridge that gap so that we're all somewhat on the same page?
So keep your notes handy in case I don't answer the second part, the one part of your question. In terms of timing, we made a policy decision, an internal policy decision back in the day when the 2014 deadline was coming up, of how we were going to look at documents. And the decision was made, we looked at it at the 30,000 foot level. Combined with that was the policy statement we put out publicly about extrapolation. You don't need to have your clean zone truly identified with hands-on samples. You can do the extrapolation, give us an estimate of where you think things are, with a big paragraph at the end saying, but you have to prove it at the end. I try not to do this often, but I'll quote Mark, unintended consequences.
I hate that term.
We knew we were going to get a large number of documents in, either whether it was 2014 or 2016. A lot of RIs came in, and we had enough RAOs coming in the door. We knew we had to address those. When you look at our metrics, we did have a big kick up in the number of RAOs. Those we were time limited by statute to the 3-year review. After that, we couldn't look at those anymore. So we started getting this backlog on the RI side of things, which we then would address when the RAO came in. In hindsight, that may not have worked out as well as we had hoped it would. Maybe I'm getting in trouble for saying that out loud and being recorded on it. I look at the numbers and I don't see a way to avoid that. That's definitely part of how we got to this situation. Another part where where we're having trouble specific to the RI, I'll throw it out there, are cases that are along surface water bodies that nobody. I get it. I'm not condoning it, but I get it. Nobody wants to go into a river. Nobody wants to go into the surface water. It's far more problematic if it's tidal. It's far more problematic when you're on the downstream end, on the potential receiving end. So a lot of RAOs came in where they never went into the river. They never looked at the water. And it's like, we're sorry, but your RI is not complete. And then we ran into the issue of timeframes and things like that. If there is a way that we can, and again, this is something we are looking at internally, how can we get better caught up on the RI side of things so that we're not doing, quote unquote, a full historical review at the time of the RAR or the RAO. We need to be farther ahead by the time that those reports come in. Or more, I shouldn't say farther ahead, we should be more caught up by the time those reports come in.
So just to ask you a question on that, because I think it's interesting, and I just had this recently with something I was working on. I know that the premise is that the department doesn't look at every report, okay? But when it comes to remedial action permits, that's an area where you do look at the report, okay? But also, whenever an LSRP uses something in their toolbox, Thiesen's polygons, averaging, something that, is pushed upon LSRPs, use your toolbox, use your independent professional knowledge. Anytime we do that and it's not in the box, it may be a little bit out, that also triggers a review. Because we're clearly putting it on the forms now and it's going in there. That seems to be delaying or slowing down the process. Is there a way to change that?
I'm going to give you a non-committal yes. Obviously we should be able, we can internally decide here are the flags we're going to look at. And right now, if there are 10 things on the list that are flags, maybe we knock a couple of those off. Again, that's an internal discussion we need to have to figure out, where is an area where the documentation we have out there, the guidance we have out there is sufficient, the training we've given is sufficient, what we're seeing coming in is sufficient. This isn't a red flag issue anymore. And we do evaluate that. Conversations with the review groups, things move around. We used to look at these 5 things, now we're looking at these 4 things. That it does change what they need to consider to be an actual review element. One of the ones that they stick on is some of the ARSs. I think you were going there, the alternative remediation standards. And to be honest, I need to go back and look at the remediation standard rule 26D. I believe it might be specified in there. Here are the ones where you can just, here's the equation, go ahead and do it yourself, versus these 2 or 3, if you manipulate on this side of the equation, those are the ones we need to verify and make sure everything's still good to go. The rule itself speaks to, I used to have this better memorized. There were like 3 things where it demands department review. There's eco reviews, there's the presumptive remedies if you do something different than the ones that are prescribed in the rule. Alternative fill is one. If you don't meet the 3 prongs of the alternative fill, that requires that you send in the fill use plan ahead of time and receive department approval on it first. I will put out there, alternative fill has been a sticking point and a problem for us. We have had, and I don't deny this is anecdotal, we have had multiple situations of people abusing or misusing the alternative fill provisions in the rule, and then coming back and asking the department for forgiveness. I'm not a big fan of that, to be honest. Can we get those? Should we get those reports turned around faster? Probably, but I would still prefer that you needle us about getting that report reviewed, then come back and say, well, I brought the fill in, I put the building up, and now it's too late. That just makes it harder for us when we look at these moving forward.
So that's a great point you just made. So we have a situation like that. We have a permit in, we're using alternative fill, whatever. How do we bring that to somebody's attention that this development, which is supported in Trenton, maybe even has EDA money, is going forward? We need you to look at this today. Is there a process? Short of picking the phone up and calling you, and that's not the answer. And short of picking up the phone and calling up in the commissioner's office, how would somebody go about doing that?
And actually this came up as part of the IPJ discussions. Work your way up through the chain of command. The org chart is listed in there, and I get it. We do have a couple of holes in our management structure as well that we need to fill. But if you're working, if it's an alternative fill issue, contact Bureau, contact Alan Motter. He's the acting manager in that group. Let him know. I don't know if this situation would necessarily arise. Contact either Marianne Kuzerk or Joel Friedel if you have some flavor of groundwater issue, whether you're trying to push through your CEA and you need us to approve it, things like that. Work your way up the chain. And I'm not throwing Alan under the bus when I say this. If you call Alan and you don't get a response, and you call him a second time and you don't get a response, move it on up. Marianne's actually is the assistant director over Alan. Just keep moving it on up the chain. And I've had situations where I have reminded my managers, you get a call, you respond to it. I try to word it nicely and not get too angry about it. But I can use the excuse we're all busy. Things get lost in the sauce sometimes. I've told my staff, if you send me something and you don't hear from me in a week, it's because I'm busy and it's been lost. Don't be afraid to remind me about it. Send me another email, come walk in my door. If you can get past Mo, good luck to you. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask a second time.
Remember, this is recorded.
Yeah. No, Mo is aware that I say these things. But your best bet is to work your way up. If I'll be honest, if you call me directly and I see it's an alternative fill issue, I'm just going to send it down to Alan and say, call the person back. All you've done is taken up that minute and a half of my day.
Right. And that's a good lead in. At the last SHRAG meeting, there was a lot of talk about data miner changing, reports that we're going to see in the public changing to where we can actually see who has a permit, if it's been assigned, things we haven't seen in the past. Has that fully been implemented yet?
If it has, they haven't told me about it. I know we are looking at trying to get that information available. Let me jot that down, and I can check with the IT folks.
Yeah. Only because that will give us in the outside world more information to be able to get answers that we need and not have to go right to the top. With that said, I had a great technical consultation the other day with Mary Ann and Lynn. I think it's a process that LSRPs should be using before they submit reports in. Are you seeing that going to change at all, as well as with LSRPs being able to work with your staff, maybe expanding it a little more?
So this kind of dovetails in with timing and IPJ. Way back, we had a huge emphasis when LSRP World first came into being. We had a very large emphasis on compliance assistance. The idea of compliance assistance, and this always comes out wrong. I am not. Let me preface, and maybe I should sum it up instead of preface. Let me preface. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not implying. I'm not insulting. I'm not trying to insult when I say this. The thought process was we would have the compliance assistance, LSRPs would get up to speed, we would start backing off of compliance assistance in that everybody would know what was going on. LSRPs would get the feel of things, they know their side of the business, we know our side of the business. We could move staff around, again, where they were otherwise needed. I think that the program is actually still, and I shouldn't say still, will always be dynamic enough. Things change enough. What we emphasize today may not be what we emphasized yesterday or tomorrow. What LSRPs need to know today may not be what they needed to know yesterday or tomorrow. So we're looking at maybe, we need to ramp up, and I'm not saying we're going to have 50 people doing compliance assistance, but maybe we need to go back to a more emphasis on compliance assistance, doing things up front, better ensuring that the information that comes in is either what we need or a whole lot closer to what we need. And again, in terms of that data gap issue, that things are addressed, rather than being punitive at the end, being more assistive during the process itself. We want to balance it. We don't want to get back into a hand-holding mode. We don't want to take it that far, but if a half-hour phone call today saves 2 or 3 months of grief down the road, let's have that half-hour phone call today.
Right.
So again, those are some of the discussions. Excuse me. So those are some of the discussions we're having internally to see, what processes can we change on our side. Working with LSRPs and trying to improve it on that side as well.
Yeah, I mean that could overall expedite the entire program and process relative to permits and remediation review, report review. And you said it a while ago. Both of your predecessors have said it too. Your immediate concerns are the public health and safety of the residents of New Jersey. And so I think a lot of times, and I'll speak for myself, sometimes we look at some of the comments we get and we're like, well, how does that play into protecting a receptor? And I think there's a balance there that, whether it be working with your staff ahead of time or having a clear description and understanding in your report that will avoid those issues in the future. And there are 710 LSRPs, there's always going to be 1 or 2 that have issues. I don't think the department is saying that 710 LSRPs don't know what they're doing at times, or maybe they are. But these always going to have outliers, and I think that's really one thing. We've spent a lot of time on IPJ, and I appreciate you doing that. And on permits, I want to jump real quick because I want to make sure that we stay on time. SARA 2.0 changed some of our world. Wasn't as, a lot of people joke and say it was 1.1 and it really didn't change much, but it did put you into a rulemaking process and rule updates. Where are you with that right now? What do you see time frame, and what do you see as far as stakeholder meetings or having a part before a rule would come out?
So we're hoping that we are in the home stretch on this rule, putting together the rule proposal. We have a document in with the commissioner's office. It's bullet points of, here are the highlights kind of thing. I am hoping to hear back from them this week. They were working on one other document for me that I got yesterday, so I'm hoping they can hit the ground running on the second one and have it ready for me. I'm going to be out tomorrow and Monday. Hopefully it's ready by the time I come back Tuesday. Once we have that document and we know they're comfortable with what we want to say or what we are saying in that document, that will form the basis for what we hope would be the last stakeholder meeting. And again, it will be basically just setting forth, here's where we're going with this rule proposal. Again, we would love to get the rule proposal out later this spring or early in the summer. And as much as anything, that's to get it done in time, as there is next year is an election year in New Jersey.
Is it really?
Or in the nation, I'm sorry. It's a presidential election year. This odd numbered year for New Jersey. It's been 34 years and I still can't keep it straight. There's an election this year in New Jersey.
The whole legislature's up for election, so it'll be a busy year.
But we know we need to get that rule out. One of the issues that came up was actually through the board rules, which is moving towards adoption. That got proposed however long ago.
November.
And but again, that's moving towards adoption. And I believe one of the problems is some definitions are changing, and the board rules cite the tech regs, the technical requirements, as the source of the definition. So there's going to be a discrepancy that what should be a definition has not yet been updated because the technical requirements have been updated. The best I can say I know I'm diving into the weeds on that, but the best I can say is you need to look at the statute, because the statute, no pun intended, rules all. If the statute says turn left and the rule says turn right, you have to turn left. It doesn't matter what the rule says. So we know we need to get that proposal out. We're working on it, and again, we're hoping to have it out sometime late spring, early summer.
So to clarify what you just said, even though you haven't come out with your rule update yet or your modifications based upon CSRR 2.0, if it's in CSRR 2.0, it's in effect today.
Correct.
Actually, Bob Lippincott just made a great comment. Is it possible? I know this is stepping back one subject. Internally, I believe there's things that report reviewers work with, whether it be a checklist or what they're looking for and things like that. Is there a way to share that with the LSRPs so that there used to be a long time ago, there was something called a DICAR, which I remember because I'm an old man, the Discharge Investigation Corrective Action Report. And there was actually a checklist that I think Joe Miller had put together. And you basically, when you would finish your report, you would go through and say, yes, 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 yes. It simplified it a little, and I used to provide that as an appendix. Is there something that might be able to do that? And I know we upload everything now, except for permit apps, but that may help bring everybody together relative to exactly what the department's looking for in those reviews.
So in confession mode, it's been a long time since I've looked at our forms. Way back when I was the executive assistant, I was involved in those committees and checking out what was on forms. I'm trying to remember how checklist oriented the forms are. I'll be honest, I'm a fan of checklists. That's just, again, the way my brain works. I do better at the end of it. I just look, okay, here are the 10 things I need. Do I have them in there? Page 1, got it. Page 2, got it, that kind of thing. I'm trying to remember how checklist oriented the forms are, if that's already there. But then I know in terms of the online services, there's always the I'm going to submit it later button. Right. There are situations where you're allowed to get around things so that you can make that submission. I'll be honest, and I can never remember what all the acronyms on this, the ECCC, I think I have the right number of C's in there, that Effective Communication Committee. There's another C, which I don't remember what it stands for. When they were discussing what they wanted to do, I'll be honest, I threw out, how about a checklist? They went with an FAQ. We're going to see how the FAQs work. But again, I may have staff beating down my door later today for saying this. if you guys were all to demand, let's get a checklist that we can use to make sure, this is what the department wants to see, I might be a supporter of such a request. I'm not saying to now send that in, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And again, I'm also not looking at, we've been asked in the past, can you give us a list of here are the things we're looking for? And I don't know that we're going to go that far. That's almost sort of kind of to me like discussing what's our enforcement policy in terms of, okay, here are the things we're going to look for in a report. Well, okay, now everybody knows here's where I'm going to put my emphasis. Am I going to give short shrift on something else? Or am I just going to make sure I build up that one part because I know the department's looking at it? Again, we want the documents to be whole because they should be whole, not because, okay, this is what the department's going to be looking for. I hope I made sense on how I said that.
Yeah, I think you did. And I think the other thing too is I think the world has changed with the online service. You're doing the questions there. You've gotten a little bit away from the way the forms used to be structured, even though the remedial action permit still has a clear, concise form, whether it's soil or groundwater. I think it just comes down to sometimes, if you're driving, there's speed limit signs. When you go from 55 to 65 and vice versa, stuff like that. But I think it's clear just to see what you may look at on the inside that we may not think about and we don't hear about until 2 years later, where we may have been able to accomplish it earlier. So Bob has a follow-up to that. Can you unmute yourself, Bob?
Sure. Hi, David. Thanks for joining us this morning and providing a lot of great information and having this discussion. I just wanted to follow up with something. I know Phil sort of, I think you filtered my question a little bit. You went for the jugular for a whole checklist. I didn't ask for that. It'd be great. But really what I was pointing to is just one simple thing that I think is fairly, I would hope we can agree on it, regarding the dates of reports versus versions of guidance. And it seems to me reasonable that reports and RAOs that are issued under a set of guidance documents and regulations at the time wouldn't be retroactively required to comply with updated guidance. And I wouldn't say this if it was once or twice. This has been something that we've seen a number of times. And I don't think there's anything nefarious or going on. I just think that sometimes it's just, it's not thought of. There's so much guidance out there, and the guidance documents that are available are the latest versions. Those are the reasonably easily attainable guidance documents, but the older ones aren't necessarily so easy to find. So I can understand the practical aspects of this, and there would be some I think practical solutions, but one ultimately would be if the in some way get into the general practice for the reviewers to consider the version of the regulations, guidance, maybe even the statutes in reviews to be more efficient.
So we should be employing we should be reviewing a document based on the guidance and the rule that was in effect. You're right, when the document was submitted. Where I think part of the problem comes in is, so if you submitted your RI, I'm just gonna, please don't hold me to meeting my timeframes here. You submitted an RI in 2018, you're using all the guidance that was in effect up until the day, you did that based on the guidance that was in effect up till the day you submitted it. You then submit your RA this year, a couple of those guidance documents changed. We should be looking at the RI on the one, the RA under anything that's been updated, and where there's a glitch is, and this is one that came up in a previous meeting, it was eco. So you submitted an eco review based on a 2018 eco guidance. That's all fine and dandy. That was an RI. Unless you closed eco, you still need to then update the eco as part of the RA, just like you update, every phase you need to update and make sure you're at speed. That one needs to get looked at under the 2022 guidance. Where I think we may run into a problem is, do we look at the RI, if we look at the RI information as 22 guidance? The RI should be standalone with the old, the RA should be standalone with the new, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes, that creates confusion on both sides. The RI may be fine, but did it get updated and completed again based on the new guidance? You know, that I'm not focusing on it purposely, but you know, the eco, you may be 90% there, and then the other 10% you just need to make sure is updated pursuant to the new guidance. Our staff needs to realize that as well. They shouldn't be looking at everything under that new guidance. So, you know, and that came up in a, like I said, a meeting a couple of weeks ago. And again, it's something that I've let Lynn know and Mary Ann know that, you know, their staff, they need to get that down to staff. Again, you have to keep in mind, you're reviewing issues based on what was in place at the time it was done. You know, obviously, if we changed guidance in 22 and you wrote that document in 18, you didn't know what we were, you know, it's 4 years apart. There's no way you knew what was going on. So hopefully we can, I'm not saying it isn't happening, but I agree, you know, we need to watch for that.
Yeah.
And again, but the same thing on the LSRP side, when you're sending in the updated document, you have to be using the updated guidance.
Yeah, or at least give an explanation why the former guidance would be applicable and
Yep.
produce the same,
Right.
you know, and that would be a deviation in the documents.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Actually, thank you for saying that, because again, you know, that's another part of it is, I'm going to quote somebody here, I won't say who, but you know, just document. If you don't do something, just tell us why. You can't just say, you know, in my judgment, I didn't have to do this. You have to then say, and here's why. You get us that information, it takes us so much farther down the road and gets us closer to the end line. That, you know, that's a lot of what we're looking for on these.
And after an RAO is issued, though, when guidance changes, I don't think those kind of explanations are required.
Once we have that RAO, the only place it may come in, and to be honest, I never thought of this until you said it that way, is when you're doing your biennial certifications. You know, again, that, oh, actually, yeah, you know, it's in, I believe it's in the rule that when you do your biennial certification, has there been any impact from updated statutes, you know, changes in statute, changes in rule? I'm not sure, honestly. I'd have to go look at the rule if it also says if there are updates in guidance. But, you know, when you're sending in that 2-year review, it should be based on today's guidance, not the guidance from when you got the RAO or issued the RAO, sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks. That's perfect. Thanks, Bob. Okay. We have like 7 minutes left. So we're gonna do a speed round. You ready?
Hold on, I have to plug in my headset. My antiquated HVAC system just turned on and I've got a blower going in my ear.
And that means we gain 2 more minutes. David didn't hear that though.
Okay.
Did you hear that?
Everybody hear me?
I hear you. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So actually, a question came up real quick. I'll ask it. David, thanks for your time. Do you foresee contaminated site remediation and the redevelopment releasing any RFPs in the future? Also, which section/staff would interface with EPA on Superfund sites in New Jersey? So
I'm going to answer the second part of the question first. If you have a Superfund case, it would, if it's a responsible party Superfund case, the interface is through our Bureau of Case Management. And actually, I keep forgetting to mention this, Anthony Cinque was recently appointed the Bureau Chief, like within the last month, I believe. So again, he would probably be your main contact for responsible party Superfund cases, for publicly funded, EPA lead Superfund cases, where there is no responsible party performing the work. It's the federal government or the state. Your contact there would be Fred Mumford, and he's the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Site Management. They handle the public. When I say publicly funded, I mean that EPA is running the show because there's no RP.
Okay. The first part of the question was, any RFPs coming out in the future?
So I'm assuming for RFP, requests for proposal.
Yes.
I mean, the only RFPs I'm really used to, and I shouldn't even say that, is, you know, on our publicly funded side, we have contracts where we have, you know, independent firms that we contract to on, I think it's a 3-year basis. I'm not even sure on that. I should be, but you know, we don't, as a program, typically we do not do RFPs, especially as relates to the LSRP side of of our work.
Okay, some things you did or didn't touch on, we're going to do a speed round here and go through NRD, so you can take a drink of water. NRD, we're seeing a lot more, news. We're seeing the commissioner come out with an executive order kind of outlining, I'll put in quotes, his opinion on NRD. What are you seeing from your end, and what should we expect, considering every REO we issue says, yeah, by the way, NRD is not settled?
So this issue also came up at my talk the other night, and this is, I can take the high road or the low road depending on your perspective on this. The department is not moving away from NRD. It's still a priority for the department, but NRD is handled by the Office of Natural Resource Restoration. Site remediation's role in NRD is, and a lot of it is through the LSRP side of things. We do the delineation, we determine the extent of the plume. We know it's primarily groundwater. We do have some, I think we have some sediment NRDs. It's primarily groundwater NRD issues. Our role is strictly on the technical side. We figure out this is the aerial extent, this is the volumetric extent of the plume. We send that information over to the Office of Natural Resource Restoration, and then they do their valuation and their calculation on damages. But again, as a department, it's something we're moving forward with. We're not shying away. We're working with the Attorney General's office on different initiatives. As you know, as you may know, we filed the complaint 3 weeks ago now. I believe it was on March 23rd. We filed the complaint for 1,4-dioxane against certain manufacturers and users of 1,4-D here in the state of New Jersey. From a site remediation perspective, we've been looking for 1,4-D forever. There was an interim standard way back. There was an interim standard of 10 that we've been using. In 2015, that went to the 0.4. I think that got then adopted in either 2018 or 2019 as a promulgated groundwater standard. But again, from the site remediation side, we've been looking for 1,4-D forever. So there's nothing new in that sense. The flip side of it is we're finding it in more and more places. It was used in more and more products or as additives, stabilizers, things like that. So, again, we're seeing it more widespread in the state, and that's where NRD gets involved. There's quote unquote a greater damage from it.
Right.
But I would not expect NRD to go away is my bottom line for it.
You touched upon an emerging contaminant. We've seen a lot about PFAS, PFOAs over the past 3 to 4 years. New Jersey kind of leading the way in the country. And we've seen some other emerging contaminants over the past year. Are we going to see anything in the very near future relative to any new emerging contaminants and any new standards?
In terms of standards, we posted the interim soil standards for the various PFAS last October. At some point, we will move forward with rulemaking for that to make them formal standards. A lot of that is just, there were two different Supreme Court decisions out of New Jersey in terms of, interim standards are fine, but you can't just rest on those. You have to go through the formal rulemaking process, the APA, and get those promulgated. So we will at some point be moving forward with those soil standards. I won't be shy about this. We are looking at doing an interim groundwater number for GenX, which will then allow us to do the migration numbers for GenX. Those were the only ones that were missing when we did the soil standards back in October. We have a GenX ingestion dermal number. We did not have migration numbers, but we are looking at moving forward with that. And then that would also become part of a formal rulemaking. Again, we already have soil numbers for dioxane, and it would just be a matter of if they ever get around to doing and there is a groundwater standard for dioxane, it would just be a matter of if there's an MCL. Back in the day when we first did the PFAS, it was pre-COVID, because I remember we were sitting in one of the conference rooms. We put out that checklist. It was I think it was just PFNA. It was not the other PFAS, but we did have a checklist of 4. It was PFNA, if not PFAS, PFNA, dioxane, 1,2,3 TCP, trichloropropane, and perchlorate. So those were the big four that we were looking at that time, and those are the four we are focused on now. We are not, as site remediation, we're not solely in control of what we would consider in the state as emerging contaminants. And, we work with the water program on that and things. It's a lot of these come out of the UCMR data. What are we suddenly seeing, or what contaminants that aren't typically caught by analyses or aren't typically thought of as being seen in the environment. When we start seeing things in these UCMR data done by the federal government, that's where things start getting incorporated as emerging contaminants. So that was the long-winded answer. The short answer is, again, we have the four that we're kind of focused on, and a lot of them we're already looking for. PFAS as emerging contaminants because there's thousands of them. The problem with PFAS is getting standards, getting methods that will find them, things like that.
And labs that can do them.
And and methodologies.
Before I know Dr. Berkowitz has a question, but real quick, my last one on the hot, you touched a little bit upon it. It is on my understanding that by April 17th, we're going to see the environmental justice rules in the New Jersey Register. I know you and I talked about this. Remedial action permits are not included. What do you think EJAC will have? What effect it will have on your program?
I think it will put. There's two different answers to that, and don't let me ramble on for too long. On the permit side, I don't think it's going to have an effect. The way the law is written, it exempts permits that are needed as part of the Brownfield Act. So originally, I thought it was. And this is just me speaking. I know it's being recorded. This is just me speaking. I know there's at least one DAG on this call. Hopefully I don't get a reprimand afterwards. I thought it was originally written that it was permits required by SARA, and that would have limited things to remedial action permits. I believe the law is written that permits needed to conduct remediation through the Brownfield Act are exempted or accepted in terms of having to go through the EJ process of community involvement, et cetera. The way we had presented it to the legislature was this is to alleviate that burden. It may be an air permit, it may be a discharge permit, it may be a remedial action permit, but the idea is we're getting the contamination out. We're not putting contamination in. Right. So I think it should not have an impact. It should not slow things down. That's, again, personal opinion, my read of how the statute's written. And again, we are exempted. I haven't seen the final version of the rule. Hopefully it is something similar in the rule as well, that again, remediations won't have an issue and can move forward. The other part of the answer would be, I think it's going to put it, depending on the community, it will put additional emphasis on remediations and getting these remediations moved as quickly as possible, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but sooner than later, getting these remediations completed in these EJ's communities, in these overburdened communities, and again, trying to alleviate that burden and improving quality of life issues and things like that. So again, it may give us all more work, but I think it's all for a very good cause. It's all going to be as a positive. I'm looking forward to it, and again, I think it's a very needed and necessary and wonderful step forward in the state of New Jersey.
So, thank you. That was good. Dr. Berkowitz, you have a question?
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Go.
First of all, thank you, David. I have to tell you, and don't fall off your chair, I agree with everything you said.
Oh my God, I am going to fall.
Mic drop.
One of the things that is problematic with a regulatory agency is it's primarily in an echo chamber. You talk to yourself, you get reinforced of what you're doing, and it's tough to break out of that mold. You said a lot of good stuff today. I would recommend that you play the recording of this conversation to all of your staff. And I would reference the Brownfield Contaminated Site Remediation Act of 2018, which says the department must be effective, efficient, and timely, and flexible. And I want to congratulate you for opening up the door and having your February 22nd meeting. I thought that was a huge positive movement. I want to thank you for participating with this, and I want to thank you for all that you're doing and you're going to do. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And thank you, Phil and George and Julianne. Thank you all for having me here. It's great to see this kind of crowd and getting the word out. So, thank you very much for having me this morning.
I think it's great. Thanks for joining us. I know your time is very precious. And a quick last question. Is tomorrow or Monday a state holiday?
Tomorrow is the state holiday and Monday is visiting colleges in Boston Day.
I wasn't asking personally. I have something I need to follow up on the state and I have to make sure I get that done today. Okay.
David, stay away from Harvard. It's too expensive.
Yes.
David,
I don't think I need to worry about that.
Thank you very much for your time, and know that you have anything you need, we're here for you.
Great. Same on this end. Any
Yeah, thank you,
questions, just let
David.
us know. Thank you, everybody.
David.
Thanks, David.
Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.